Okay, now we are on to part 4 out of 5. We're almost done. This is a specialist or high investment power level tier list. You'll notice some of these units are used in very specific situations and or they're very constellation dependent, meaning that as you get more constellations, they become completely different units and can actually be far stronger than you like. Again, there's no lowest tier this time because all of them are viable, at least, but only in specific situations and only with the proper investment. I think that without proper investment, some of them are just, at C0, some of these aren't even actual units, which is kind of the problem. Let's start. Lisa. Lisa in an aggravate team where she's an aggravate sub DPS. Okay? She's actually pretty good. The problem with Lisa is that her C6 makes her skill way better. You get 3 stacks. So stacking up to that third stack without C6 is practically impossible because she uses up too much field time. Secondly, for her to be valid, you need a lot of energy recharge. Otherwise, her burst won't be up. And then thirdly, the C4 has a defense shred, which is super nice. So if you have C6 Lisa and she has good energy recharge and she has good artifacts and you're playing an aggravate team, if I fulfill all those conditions, she's good then. The problem is, one, I have to fulfill all those conditions first. And two, why not official? Even if I fulfill all those conditions, a C0 official is almost as good. So not only is it highly conditional, we have other options that are available in terms of Electro sub DPS that require very little investment in comparison and are at least as strong. So she kind of doesn't have a place, but it's not because she's bad. Amber's weakness is that her kit is really disjointed. Her burst has an incredible pyro application, which makes her unusually good at breaking hydro and cryo shields. But compared with other taunts in the game, Baron Bunny can be knocked around in a way the other taunts can't, which weakens it. What is kind of cool is that her C6, she can give her attack to her teammates, which is very nice, but it's still like a third of the C6 Thurling Tails. So it's not amazing. She's very good at using Elegy for the end if you happen to have a second one, because I'm assuming you pulled the first one for Venti. So in all those specific situations, she can be good. So if you have a C6 Amber and you need a lot of pyro application, and maybe you have a really nice weapon for her, then she's fine. But those are a lot of caveats. Moving on, Noelle. Noelle is not a unit without C6. And the problem is split scaling, right? Because her shield and her healing, which are important parts of her kit, scale on defense, and her offense scales on offensive stats. C6 makes her whole kit scale on defense. So that is what you want to do. Before that, she's not a unit. She can be good in Geo teams. And she has an interesting synergy with Fiorina. Namely that Fiorina drains hit points and Noelle heals your whole team. And she can actually be really quite good. And a well-invested Noelle with a good weapon in all those specific situations there is a very strong unit. But again, I need a C6 Noelle with a good weapon, High investment artifact specific team. You see the uh, the trend here. Kaya, constellation dependent. He has a huge power point spike at C6. I actually think he's really good. I think his C6 Kaya is really good. I think that he does a lot of damage, a lot of cryo application, good in freeze, good in melt, good in reverse melt. Anywhere you want all the cryo application, he's great. His investment requirements aren't unusual because he doesn't need ER. He needs crit stats like every other sub DPS. The thing is, he needs C6, and Kaya constellations are hard to get. So, if you happen to have a C6 Kaya, I happen to have a C6 Kaya. He's really good, but getting there is a pain. Another unit that's one of my favorites, I play her in the overworld, Ningguang. Again, I think she can be a really strong unit. Her damage is shockingly good for an attack scaling Geocatalyst, which is a combination of some of the worst things you could be, because Catalyst weapons don't do as much damage, and attack scaling Geo characters are in a tough spot, and Geo's the weakest element. So she has a lot of things stacked against her, but she slaps pretty hard. I think, though, her C1 gives her an AoE, which she needs. Her C2 resets her screen, which is a lot of energy and damage. And her C6 gives her 7 Stellar Jades after burst. So she actually hits like a train in that situation. However, you need a C6 Ningguang with good weapons, good artifacts. In that situation, she's great, actually. But again, we have to fulfill all these caveats before she comes online. And that's the weakness with kind of these original 5 characters here, is these characters need constellations to be good. And a decent amount of investment too. And if I want a Geo sub DPS, I can get, Chiori. I could get Rosaria instead of Kaya, who's more accessible, right? I could get Ito. I could get Fischl, or I could get Shaoling or some other pyro damage dealer. Like, there's just more accessible options. Not always stronger options, but more accessible options. C6 Kujosara. She's really good. You want to use her specifically in a Raiden hypercarry team, where you have a C2 Raiden and a C6 Kujosara with a really high attack weapon, such as the Skyward Heart, and a good amount of energy recharge. And if I fulfill all those requirements, then she's really good. But again, these newer specialist characters have a lot of their power gated behind their constellations. So before C2, she's not a unit. You can't play her. Like, it's very awkward. C2 is fine. C6 is good. But only in Raiden hypercarry teams. Sino's on field too long to make use of her buff. Like, she's a very, very narrow use case. Goro's an incredible Geo support. Any defense scaling Geo character, even attack scaling Geo characters, benefit from him greatly. Again, though, a lot of his power is behind constellations. I think that at lower constellations, he's still quite usable, but I need constellations to make him worth it. I also need to be playing a defense scaling Geo character, so he needs to buff Chiori, Albedo, Ito, or Noelle. So it's kind of a limited use case. And you also want to run triple Geo in his teams. So I have to meet all those caveats. But in that case, he's excellent. I mean, my understanding is amazing in all those situations. But I don't have C6 Goro yet. Moving on, Shenhe. Shenhe is a 5-star character that basically exists to buff Ayaka. I know she can buff physical and cryo in general, but she doesn't work as well with Ganyu because Ganyu attacks too slow. And in Eula, you're going to want to run Mika. So, Shenhe, specialist unit, really good. Moving on, Yunjin, again, a lot of power is gated behind constellations. She's good with normal attacks. She can buff Ayato and Yoimiya. But what I found with my C6, C2 Yunjin is if I run Fischl, I do more damage and get more energy. Like, I mean, that's the thing. When you have a character like this, you're like, why not Yelan? Why not Fischl? Just more damage from her sub DPS is probably better than buffing her main DPS because it's not quite enough. That said, I think she gets much better with constellations. Same thing with Farazan. Her C6 is her real power. She's not a unit before C2. And she also has narrow use cases. She basically is for Wanderer or Xiao teams. Outside of that, you would just run any of the other animo supports. So, again, very, very limited use character. Minka has a little more validity because he's a full party nuke healer, which is good, but his cryo application is non-existent. It's very low. He needs a good amount of energy recharge, but as we're getting the theme with these things, in order to really buff physical characters, which he's designed to do, he's basically a Eula buff unit. You need to have a C6 Mika. He's nowhere near as good before C6. So again, requires lots of constellations, lots of investment in general. Again, a thing with Xianyue and Shenhe is they both want their signature weapons because they scale on base attack. It's really important for them. Xianyun here, I think that I'm not quite sure how incredibly strong she is. She gives you plunging damage, so she works with Ganming, she works with Xiao. I'm going to put her here to be safe. She might be busted. I don't know. Kind of by its nature, no specialist unit can be meta defining. They might have very high usage rates if you own them. Like if I pulled for Shenhe, I'm going to use her. If I pulled for Xianyun, I'm going to use her. But overall, they're not used that often because they're only useful in specific niches. In those niches, they're really, really good. But you have to have that situation. And then the 4 stars on this tier list, they really need a lot of constellations. And 4-star constellations can be really kind of hit or miss. So their power, while it's there, is not so easily accessible. And some of them have very narrow use cases. That's it for a specialist tier list. We're going to have one more, and it's going to be the hypercarry tier list.